the beginning of the end. How is this scandal? Is this the beginning of the end? This scandal over Prince Andrews, which is now Mr. Andrews, is going to shatter the crown's future because they're not stopping there. It's going to be a lot more complicated. They're going further down the line and they're asking more and more questions. This is important for you to know. And the reason is this important for you to know is because this is going to come over to the US as well. These Epstein files are not anywhere done yet. It's going to go on for a while, and you know what? As soon as they reopen the government, as soon as they decide to take on a vote to allow for more and complete Epstein release of information, that is going to make a difference because you're going to see a lot of people being impacted. Look what they're doing to the prince. Right? I mean, this is becoming an issue. But forget the prince. I mean, basically what's happening is he lost his titles. Now he's being kicked out of his wonderful mansion, 30-room mansion. So he's out. But that's not what you need to worry about, because now the next thing they're going after is they're looking at the king and they're asking questions. They want to know more. Right? They want to know what else is going on. Why was this parliament is actually asking those questions? And take particular attention on how they're going to deal with this, right? Because the way they're going to deal with this is how it's going to be dealt in the US as well, because a lot of people are involved and they're going to get more involved. That is a question. And the ripple effect, the only reason you're not seeing anything in the US right now is because there is no, they haven't taken that vote to release even more information. And in that vote will release lots of information in the US about the people involved. Look how they're treating that prince. I mean, this Royal Lodge, which is a 30-room mansion located in Windsor. So in 2003, I mean, look at this deal. Prince Andrew basically, entered into a 75-year lease, paying around $1 million for an upfront premium. And he said he was going to spend committing to spend $7 million in refurbishment. So under this lease, he has paid the so-called peppercorn rent. Peppercorn rent means you haven't paid much of anything. And the lease runs until 2078. But Parliament, basically, there was an inquiry. And they said, wait a second here. Wait a second. Inquiry to the king. The PAC, which is called the Public Account Committee of the British Parliament, has formally written to both the Crown Prince and the Treasury demanding clarification on the lease terms and the value of the money of the arrangement. Why did the lease allow such a low rent? I mean, have you seen the mansion? Look at this mansion. I mean, not that one. That's the one that he's going to go to eventually. But 30-room mansion. Why did the lease allow such a low rent? Whether the lease remains appropriate given that Andrew is no longer a working royal. Right? Not anymore. Whether taxpayer funding has been used for maintenance and upkeep but not properly accounted for. Now, keep in mind that kind of inquiry, you say, well, it's in the UK. And if it's in the UK, obviously you care very much about it. And if in the US, you're saying, well, how do I care? Well, be careful. Because the same way they're going after the king. I mean, hold on, they may be going after the king too, but they went after Andrews. They may go after certain banks, which they have already done. So in the US, they have gone into the US and they are basically suing B of A and another bank, Bank of New York. And we haven't seen the files released yet. Once they get the 218 votes to allow for full release, the 218 votes are going to allow, they're going to force a vote, because Republicans don't want that. They're going to force a vote on the House chambers and force the release of all unclassified information about Epstein. You're going to hear names. You're going to see people, right? That book that just came out about Epstein and Virginia's book is out, and naming some of the names they couldn't name because they didn't want to get sued, but it's going to happen. And when that hits, it already hits the bookshop, but forget that. It's when they release all the information about the Epstein files. That's going to be a lot of damage, and so pay particular attention at how they're doing that in the UK. So basically, the PAC, which is the Public Accountant Committee, gave a deadline of November 28th for the organization to respond. They want to know, how did you come about deciding that? Knowing what you know about your brother. Okay. On October 30th, Buckingham Palace announced that the king had initiated a formal process to remove Andrew's, titles, honors. He said, well, I'm not going to use them. No, we don't want that. We want you not to use them anymore. No, we don't want that. We want it to remove. Don't do us a favor. Right? He's going to be known basically as Andrew Windsor, basically. Formal notice has been served to Andrew to surrender his lease to Royal Lodge. Now, he hasn't been kicked out yet, but they're asking to surrender your lodge. Well, that might not be that easy. Right? And move to alternative private accommodation. He basically is going to move where the other two royals that left, a 5-bedroom, house, basically, a normal house. Right? They have expressed disquiet about this proposed relocation there. Some people don't want it there. He may receive the one-time payout, and an ongoing stipend to support a part of the arrangement of his transition. So they basically kick him out. He's leaving. They're pushing. And when I say they, it's his brother. And the brother, why is the brother doing this suddenly? And this is going to be tough to deal with, because even though he is doing that, the king is being forced to do it. But I don't believe it's going to stop at Prince Andrew anymore. Right? This matters because the arrangement raises issue of public accountability. Because the Royal Lodge is held by the Crown Estate, which is a public asset. And the favorable lease terms may suggest special treatment. Why did you allow this to happen with my brother, And not this time, the lease and the low rent figure as seen of inconsistent with the principle that public estate assets should be at the best consideration of money or money worth. So the timing is very sensitive. The book came out. There's renewed public focus on Andrew's ties to Jeffrey Epstein, his legal exposures, and what role, if any, and you have to be careful, what role, if any, the royal household and public funding played in supporting his residence and have combined to increase pressure to transparency and action. So the royal family decision to strip him of titles and relocate him signals a significant shift on how the monarchy is willing to handle reputational risk. But isn't it a bit late? Right? Now, make no mistake about it. And this is why this channel is important. I want you to subscribe, because we're looking for a black swan. What does that have to do with the U.S.? Well, this kind of attitude and this kind of decisive action is going to be needed once the government opens up again pretty soon. Trust me on that. And although it's been a month now, and they allow the vote on the floor to release all undisclosed and all files on Epstein. And what's in it? Well, we're going to find out more in terms of financial transactions. In fact, right now, 2 banks are being sued, Bank of America and Bank of New York. Again, after JP Morgan was sued and paid millions of dollars. Are they going to pay to get it away? They want these people to come to Congress. So what is a possible scenario? You could have a smooth transition. Andrew surrenders the lease. Move to a smaller private residence, funded privately by the king. That's it. The Crown Estate and Treasury responds within the deadline, demonstrating that the arrangement is being reviewed and future lease term will be more rigorously applied. And the royal household framed the move as a right-sizing and accountability measure without major legal wrangles. Number 2, the lease proves highly protective of Andrew's rights. Take it easy. You just can't kick me out. Meaning, early surrender may involve significant compensation or legal negotiations. I mean, if you're he, you're just going to leave? I say, well, I lost everything here. What's in it for me? I don't care. I don't care about the crap. You can't kick me out. Right? For example, report suggests a compensation amount of almost $600,000 for early termination. They're going to pay him. And if the PAC or media uncover further taxpayer funding links or lease oversight failures, broader reputational, parliamentary, or regulatory fallout may occur. You'll be a full inquiry. The royal household might be faced pressure to renegotiate not just Andrew's lease, but other royal residence agreement, setting a precedent. The implication for the royal crown? Renewed scrutiny on how leases with royals and other privileged tenants are structured and enforced. For the monarchy, this may mark a shift towards more formalized oversight of royal assets. The queen is not there anymore. And a reduction in privilege by default. This could be a lot of damage for the monarchy, don't you think? I mean, at the end of the day, they may actually be in a lot of trouble. They could be in a lot of trouble. Because now what they're doing is they're not just going after the prince. They're not just going after maybe the king. They're going after the whole institute. Let's review let's open it all up. And then what do you really do for us? Right? What is it all about? And that happened very quickly, right? And usually when that happens, from my experience, is you have something to hide and you want it to go away. What exactly will be the terms and valuation of the compensation? Was there any public funding? How will the crown ensure future leases? Will Andrew's place in the line of succession change? Right? Where exactly is the next residence to be? So this situation surrounding Prince Andrew's lease shows there's a convergence of legal, financial, royal, constitutional questions, which is going to be coming to the new U.S. near you, coming to a congressional inquiry, but more importantly, the release of the Epstein file in the U.S. that are demanded by both Republicans and Democrats. And they've got the votes, except for one, but they can't vote the last person because the government is conveniently closed. Is that going to continue? And I think there's a theme here. There's a theme of power. There's a theme of accountability. And they are getting away with it again. Right? So where does this leave the crown? At the end of the day, you got to ask a question. Where does this leave the crown? And maybe not in a good spot. Why? Well, you need to realize that the crown right now is in trouble. And they may be in a lot more trouble than you think. Why? Well, first of all, you need to understand that the crown estate is not the private property of the king. Right? It's a public institution that manages billions in land property. It's a public institution, right? And commercial assets. So while it's doing all this, right, it in return, right, the sovereign received a fixed sovereign grant. That means a royal lodge lease is a controversy exposes a core contradiction. Prince Andrew's lease was negotiated when he was an active royal. Yet, it now looks like a private benefit from a public asset. Don't forget, the Crown Estate is not a private property of the king. It's a public institution that manages billions in land, property, and commercial assets on behalf of the state. And its profits go to the treasury. And in return, the sovereign receives a fixed income. So they're getting paid for that job, quote unquote, that they're doing. So Prince Andrew's lease was negotiated. The Crown Estate must now prove to Parliament that it acted in the taxpayers' interest. Do you actually believe that? Not out of deference to royal status. Do you actually believe that? So if the Public Accounts Committee found that the Crown Estate failed to ensure best value, it could trigger a formal recommendation to tighten governance, which it probably will, new oversight mechanism, because at the end of the day, I mean, the Queen was at a certain stature. Prince Charles, I mean, remember the history? I don't think that stature is the same. Camilla, the whole situation with Lady Diana, I mean, she died and the way she took over. And I guess the next generation, I don't know. I think it's going down very fast. Reputational damage to the monarchy's claim of neutrality and good stewardship of public assets. Don't forget, if you watch the movies and you read the history, at that time, the Queen basically forced these people to marry in a way that would benefit everyone. She forced them not to divorce. There was a lot of commitment, because then you could see and you knew that she was committed to the country and to public assets. She sacrificed a lot and she was highly respected. Can you say the same thing of Prince Charles? Of King Charles now? He's trying to make it up. But is this really working? Right? So the palace is a balancing act. For Buckingham's palace, representing the sovereign personally, the goal is damage control. So the king, must appear fair but firm and respectful of the law, the parliament, and protective of the monarchy's long-term legitimacy. But we know already that he did to help out his brother. That's why the palace insiders describe this as part of a modernization strategy. But there's a cost. It sets a precedent. If the crown pressures Andrew to give up his lease, future questions may arise about other royal residences, like Clarence House or Berkshire Park, on how those arrangements were made. They want to know everything. This is exactly what's going to happen in the U.S. I'm telling you. Number 3, the institutional impact, the crown in 3 dimensions. So you have to understand, you have the Crown Estate, which is a statutory corporate body managing the public royal property. And then you have the monarchy, which is symbolic institution. And then you have the sovereign, individual exercising limited constitutional influence. This risk, the Crown Estate may face audit reforms and new parliamentary reporting rules. I mean, this is getting complicated, right? This is getting very complicated. Because it is complicated, it's because it's all-encompassing. And this is exactly what's going to happen in the U.S. The monarchy faces erosion of more legitimacy if seen shielding privilege. So if the crown must show that it can separate public stewardship from private loyalty or face legislative pushback, that could narrow its autonomy. I mean, that's what we're talking about. I don't think that's going to be any different in the U.S. So what is the public sentiment in the political climate? Well, public anger about the peppercorn rent and unequal treatment fits a broader populist narratives in Britain, one where austerity and cost of living struggles clashes with perceptions of royal indulgence. If the parliament successfully pursues the Crown Estate to review or revoke Andrew's lease, it will mark a turning point. The monarchy will be seen as a subject to, not above, public accountability, and that's going to be a problem. I mean, it could strengthen Republican or reformist voices calling for financial transparency of royal asset. Yet, a decisive move by King Charles could restore moral authority. Do you think he'd done enough? Kick his brother out? Well, kick him out. He's not out yet. He's not going to go out. He's going to go out kicking and screaming. So what are the long-term consequences of the crime? Well, if it's managed well, I think that the monarchy emerges leaner, more transparent. The Andrew precedent becomes a proof point of accountability, blah, blah, blah. But if it's mismanaged, the scandal becomes a symbol of royal entitlement. Parliament may legislate stricter control of the crown asset. The king's reform agenda risks being seen as cosmetic. So in short, the crown is at the crossroad. Right? It's a beginning of. Is it the beginning of the end? It's not the end, but it's a warning signal. It's a warning signal. I mean, no single scandals can topple a 1,000-year-old institution overnight. But this moment is different because it combines three long-term structural pressures. The first one is a moral authority erosion. For years, the monarchy's power has rested not on law, but on trust. It's trust, like the financial system in the U.S., trust. The Andrews saga pierces that trust. It's not about one man's misconduct. It's about whether the crown can hold its own family accountable. Two, the economic transparency. I mean, the Public Accounts Committee inquiry puts the Crown Estate, the Treasury, and the palace finances under direct parliamentary glare. That's unprecedented. They would have never dared do something like that, even though they can. Once the sunlight enters the system, it rarely retreats, right? You're going to find out more and more stuff. You say, oh my God, please don't look into this. There's a generational shift. The polling shows that the young Britons under 35 increasingly indifferent or skeptical about monarchy as an institution. What do we need these rich people running around? What do they do for us? So historically, every British monarch who survived crisis did so through adaptation. Victorian, Elizabeth I, Charles II. What did they do? Modernization pressure, remember? Transparency and legitimacy crisis. That's what Charles did. The Queen basically televised monarchy, restrained neutrality. Remember that when she did the wedding and all that publicly in the 80s. That was a change. It was a change. She had to survive, she did it. So Charles needs to handle this moment very decisively. He could strengthen the institution or he could lose the institution altogether. A little better. It's an existential threat. Right? The real danger is not legal or parliamentary. It is cultural irrelevance. The monarchy's power is emotional. Ceremony, symbolism. When that emotional bond erodes, so does consent for its existence. That's the problem. Will this affect your life? Yes, it will, believe it or not. It will affect your life. I'll show you how. Look how hard they're going after this major institution. Right? Major institution. What do you think happens in the US when the government opens up and they decide to open everything up? Even if you don't live in the UK, look at how they're dealing with it. They're dealing with it in a way, a strong way. They're asking this guy who has a lease. This is not a piece of paper written on a parchment. He has a lease, technically, and you can't just break a lease like that. I bet you the conversation between Charles and Andrew is, bro, you gotta go. You have to go because I'm in trouble if you don't go. What do you mean? Where am I supposed to? I'm not going in a 5-bedroom house. I want to go in the 30-bedroom house. Can't. You got to go. Well, make me. You know what I mean? That's the kind of conversation. And of course, what's have to do with the U.S. is you could see the parliamentary. It's not just between the two brothers talking here. It's how the institution, they're going after the institution. Now they want to say, well, what about you? King Charles, How are you? Can we see how you're spending the money? Because in the US, once the US reopens its government, which is going to be soon, that they're going to have the last vote coming in, the 218th vote is going to come in, and it's going to force the release of all that information about additional information about Epstein. Some people have said that, you know what? Maybe the reason why you have a shutdown is because they were going to get that last vote and now they can't get it because the government shut down. It's not really true. I mean, they could vote regardless. But obviously, it's a lot of noise. So maybe what's happening in the background, they are kind of managing the coming out of the shutdown, so that when they force the vote and the vote comes out and they say yes, release the information, and it goes to the president, he's going to have to sign. And if he doesn't sign, and they're going to say, why not? I mean, are you involved with these people? And there's lots of questions about that. And are people going to pay attention to it? Are they going to be mired into the situation with the mess that's happening with the fact the government was closed, now it's open, and blah, blah, blah. So if they were able to go at it in such a strong way in the US, in the UK, why are they not going to do the same thing in the US? I mean, they've been talking about holding JP Morgan's B of A, which is being sued, and Bank of America, which is also being sued, onto Congress and answer questions. Because now they're showing that all these banks did business with Epstein after he was proven guilty. So, and there's lots of people being mentioned, of course, in that book that Virginia came out with. Some of the names were redacted out because they would have been sued, but there's a lot of, you're talking about 20, 30 people here. That's a lot of people. And if that comes out, it's going to be tough to squash it down the same way they can't squash it down in the UK. Now, why is this? Why is this happening now? I mean, Epstein is an old story. No, why this is happening now? Because this is not an old story. It's a new story. It's a story about cleaning the swamp. It's a story about public accountability. It's a story about the unevenness of the system. Now, for some reason, it's happening now. Now, people are basically there's a shift. There's a more of a, we're not in the middle anymore. We're either totally to the left or we're totally to the right. And I'll tell you why this is happening, frankly, and I'm probably guilty of it, is because of social media. Social media is basically showing you what you want to see. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, by the way, without being too obvious. Because that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to find out what is the next black swan's going to happen. And if you join my channel or my Patreon, I'll show you I should take advantage of these things. Everything having to do with the stock market, everything having to do with rare minerals and quantum computing. It's not about just about being gossipy, although it's interesting, but it's also about understanding what is the bigger picture. And the bigger picture right now is you have a shift. And unfortunately, it's a shift driven by social media, which is basically accentuating the positive and accentuating the negative. Because they're showing you what you want to see. But it shouldn't be that way. You should be shown what you don't want to see or don't want to hear, so you have a more open mind. But now, unfortunately, the minds are getting very restrictive. Why? Because you don't get to decide what to watch, right? The entity, better known as the algorithm, tells you what you're supposed to be watching. So hopefully with this channel, what I'm trying to do is, let's look at both sides. Because you're saying, well, what do I care about something in the UK? I'm in the US. No, you need to care. You need to care because you're going to see coming down. Now, of course, how does this impact you? I'll tell you what. They open this thing in the US, they vote, and they release information. A bunch of people have to go to Congress. It undermines the Republican Party. It undermines the president, the ability to do anything, and it impacts the ability to get things going, right? And the U.S. has a lot of issues that they need to deal with. They got to, they have this decoupling with China right now, and the last thing they need to do is worry about all these other things. But this thing is sticky, right? This is very personal. There's abuse, blah blah blah. It becomes very difficult to deal with. So back to the UK, the prognosis is a crisis of legitimacy not yet collapsed. But right now, the monarchy still commands broad, though thinning, public support, especially among older Britons in the Commonwealth. But the Prince Andrew's crisis cuts to the heart of legitimacy. If the king cannot bring justice and fairness within his own household, how can the crown claim to embody integrity of a nation? And you have a pedophile in your ranks, technically. Although he keeps going around, I didn't do anything. Well, then you should have come to the U.S. and face trial. Why didn't you face trial? Right? To survive, the institution must outgrow its own myth. Open the books, accept that moral immunity no longer exists, separate personal loyalty from public responsibility. Charles does that, then history may remember this as the beginning of the end. Not at the beginning of the end, but as a rebirth of a modern monarchy. So maybe what you should do, you should just say, you know what? You come in and you take a look at it. Tell me what I did wrong and I fix it. But if he's trying to move around and do this and that and take him from a 30-bedroom house to a 5-bedroom house, you just kick him out. Although I don't know if you could do that. Plus, don't forget, if you're Prince Charles, so-called Prince, and you're in that position, you're going to say, hey, bro, I know things, right? You know that I know. Do you really want to kick me in the street? Because I'm going to start talking. You could bring down the monarchy if he starts talking. It could be a whistleblower. You see where this goes? This could be major. So on one hand, the king has to get his brother out of this beautiful mansion. That's a 30-room mansion you're seeing right now. So he's out. Well, he's being asked to leave. But he has a lease. So let's see if he could actually do it. But once he's out, he's going to say, where am I going? A 5-bedroom? And what am I going to live on? Where am I going to be? You know what? This is not going to work out. I'm going to fight this. And if you keep pushing me, I'm going to start talking. I mean, because at the end of the day, what else can he lose, right? I mean, he lost everything, and he's guilty in front of everyone. How much more can he take? Well, you could say, well, I'm going to start talking. I know a lot of things. Guys, start looking here and there and here and there and here. You know, imagine the mess that this would be. This would be a huge mess for the monarchy. So, how'd you deal in something like that? Cut your losses. But be careful, cut the fat. Don't cut in the muscle, because if you cut the muscle, then you're going to be in trouble. And of course, you could say that who cares about Prince Andrew is no good. Yeah, but he's the muscle, meaning that he knows a lot about this institution. He knows a lot about what happened. And he may decide to start talking. And I believe it's the beginning of the end. I mean, it's not happening soon, but obviously, I mean, if you look at the character of the queen, right, and then you look at the character of, I mean, she stood with that man that she was married to until she died. So you're getting married, you stick to your guns, and so there's a respect for that. Charles, I don't know. You read the story again, and the fact that Camilla is with him now, and his wife died, and he divorced, and he did all these things, right? I don't know. And then if the brother, I mean, boom, boom, boom. I mean, you've got the next generation of prince and princesses, and they've already kind of made themselves very, very small. They're just going around. There's no character anymore to it. So if there's no character, who needs them? I mean, at that level, you need to be a king, you need to be a queen, you need to mean something, you need to decide, you need to sacrifice, where you they've got to believe that you believe with them. And you got to represent the nation. You know, Churchill, the Queen. I mean, watch the Crown. It was a great, especially at the beginning. You could see the sacrifices people went through, and there was respect for that. But now, and on top of that, you've got a pedophile among your rents, and on top of that, you put him in a 30-bedroom house, really, a mansion on the ground, and the only reason you're talking about it is because the book came out of that girl that killed herself. Right? It's not like she's making any money out of it. It's the worst thing that could happen. And in cases like that, it's the beginning of the end. It's the beginning of the end because, frankly, there's nothing to save here. You guys lost it a long time ago. You don't want to admit it. You don't want to see it. But you've lost it a long time ago. And at the end of the day, what the US needs to worry about is, well, what are we going to do about it? Well, because, you know, that vote that's coming out to Congress when the government opens up again, well, it's going to force a vote. It doesn't mean that everything is going to be released. They're basically going to force a vote on releasing all that information about the Epstein files. Thing is, the president needs to sign up on it. If he doesn't, that's going to be a problem. But I'm sure he doesn't want it to get to that level. He doesn't want to have to sign off on because especially when you have Johnson that's saying, you know, there's no reason for any more release of information for the simple reason is there's nothing new. There's nothing there. Well, I don't know, because banks are being sued again. People are losing their jobs, right? The UK ambassador lost his job. So see, there's a lot of things happening in the background you might or might not be aware of. And if that impacts the government too much, how does it impact the government? It's going to suck the energy out of the room. Lots of energy is going to come out of that room after they decide to do all the things that they have said. So let's be careful. Let's keep tracking. Let's see what happens next. But I think this is the beginning of the end for the monarchy in the US, in the UK. And then watch, let me tell you, watch how this is going to be handled in the US. Because they're going to have to do something. They cannot say it doesn't exist. Well, they could say no because the government is shut down. But once the government opens up, they're going to have to take that vote. And they're going to see, you know, how they react to whether, like, if Johnson says, I don't want to put on the floor. Well, no, this is going to force it on the floor. Even if you don't want to, it's going to be put on the floor. You're going to have to eat it. And then, of course, as it's not a list of names. What's going to happen is a list of transactions. That's more complicated. Banks, and they've shown that these people, for example, at J.P. Morgan and Bank of America, there's been a bunch of articles where they're showing, you know, there were transactions for like hundreds of transactions for $9,000 below the $10,000 threshold that came out, and basically was cash being withdrawn and paid off. And they say basically they paid the girls, right? And the bank didn't say anything. I mean, technically, you have a group in a bank that's supposed to monitor this information, monitor the flow of funds, you know, because for in case they're trying to clean the money or there is illicit use of that money, and that's why anything above 10,000, people start wondering. Well, he kept it just below 10,000. Like $9,800. There's a bunch of transactions after he was guilty. 2011, 2013, 2014, and the compliance group didn't do anything. Well, be careful because, you know, compliance. Now they're more independent, but then, you know, they were kind of saying, well, he's a huge earner. He's got huge money in our accounts. I mean, we're going to sacrifice ourselves? You're going to sacrifice your young? No. So let's see what happens next.